Welcome to Universe Unveiled, the podcast where we explore the mysteries that challenge our understanding of history and the universe. I'm Jacqueline.
And I'm Sarah. Before we introduce our guest, I want to let our team introduce themselves, starting with our IFNP president, Ricardo Calvario. If you'll tell everyone where they can find you, Ricardo.
So thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here once more. And today we have the pleasure and the privilege to have Dan Richards with us, which I'm very eager to listen from. You can find me at Ricardo Calvario 1 at X and at the podcasts at the Institute for Natural Philosophy that you can find on YouTube, on X. You also have our Pharaohs magazine. And I think that's it for now. Thank you for having me once more.
Thank you. Shaman, Jason. You going by Shaman or Jason?
Whatever everybody's comfortable with. I've learned to answer to both at this point. Jason Huffman, screen name Shaman711. You can find me on X, YouTube, and Rumble under that screen name. I'm happy to be here. I've got my series Antediluvian Alabama and Finding Mabilla on YouTube. I'm really happy to be here to talk to Dan and learn from Dan. I've been watching Dan for about 2 years now, ever since Graham kind of put him out there publicly in the market for us. And not only learning from what all he's done, his work, his story arc, but when you watch Dan, it's not hard to see some of the things that motivate him. And being a father, was one of those things. And that's one of the things that motivates me. So there's many reasons, both personally and professionally. I'm just honored to be here, Dan. And thanks for coming and talking to us, man.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I mean, shoot. That's... Go ahead. Sorry.
That's all right. So, of course, thank you to our IFNP boys, Ricardo and Jason. Today's guest is a sharp-witted creator and researcher who dives headfirst into the shadowy corners of ancient history and archaeology, uncovering mysteries that mainstream scholars dismiss as fringe, while debunking the debunkers who cling to outdated narratives. Through his engaging videos on YouTube, he explores historical enigmas with a skeptical eye that's too rigorous for conspiracy enthusiasts and too irreverent for academic gatekeepers.
With an knack for blending humor, rigorous fact-checking, and bold challenges to institutional dogma, Dan embodies the spirit of independent inquiry in an era of controlled discourse, reminding us that history's deepest secrets deserve more than rote dismissal. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Dan Richards.
Thank you. Wow, I after all those words, I need to fire the person that I hired to write my epitaph and shit. Thank you. very, very kind words, everyone. Thank you so much.
And you're a very honored guest. We're very glad to have you here today and have this opportunity to speak to you. So thank you so much for coming on.
All the smoke up, we blow up your beard is well earned, sir.
Well, thanks.
That's the other thing. Thank you all for including me in today's best beard competition. I'm happy to be.
Represent. Nice. No, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. This was great. It was fun talking to you before, Sarah. So it was. I'm glad to have the opportunity to do it again.
Absolutely. Looking forward to actually being able to kind of get a word. I know it was kind of crowded last time, so
yeah,
looking
there was
forward to
Brady
this.
Bunch levels of screen packed full of like 9 people, 8 people.
People want to learn from you.
Oh, well, thank you.
People like what you're doing. I mean, how did you get here, Dan? What? You just came out of nowhere.
Back in the 70s, there was no cable really, so my parents were bored. And then after, sorry, but yeah, no, my son, I have custody of my son, and I was into this stuff for a while. I got custody of him 10 years ago, and about 2.5, 3 years ago, he got to the age where he was just kind of like this helicopter parenting crap that you're doing. He's 17 now, so when he was telling me to basically piss off, I started started looking into the Graham Hancock side of things again and the ancient archaeology and stuff. I've been watching videos and stuff on this for a while. I mean, I've been into ancient Egypt forever. My copy of Fingerprints of the Gods I pre-ordered in '95, so I've been reading this stuff since I was a youngin'. But when I got a chance to get back into it, I knew we were in this kind of age of the internet debunker. So I as soon as I watched Ancient Apocalypse, the next thing I did was look on YouTube and see the debunkers, and I saw Milo Rossi and Stefan Milo, and immediately I was like, neither one of these guys are really familiar with Graham's work. I mean, they're familiar with pieces of it, but this straw man, very much in line with the way that the modern day discourse is. It's like why actually have this like proper perception of what the other person is when I can build an effigy and just rail away at it. So
Right.
that was exactly what it was there. So I started making videos right away, and it was right away there was a decent response. And then at one point I noticed that there was really nobody else doing it, that there was nobody else really addressing that. People picked one side or the other. Either it was like Atlantis has to be a thing, and therefore I'm going to defend everything Graham says to the bitter end, or Atlantis isn't a thing, therefore I'm going to attack everything Graham says to the bitter end. And that's, I again, in line with modern discourse. So just sad, but
Not productive, right? Just sad, really.
well, it's definitely not productive. I mean, to get all philosophical about it, we live in a society that's based off of compromise and democracy and like finding middle ground. The point when everybody's just like, we can't find middle ground on anything. It's this way or that way. Not a whole lot of other options on the table except for fisticuffs. So,
Yeah.
Again, that's outside of the ancient archaeology side of thing, but it is, I think, indicative. I was surprised. I thought that I for sure was walking into an arena where there wasn't going to be a bunch of politics involved, and I was as soon as I saw people getting accused of racism, racism
What?
because I like big rocks. Come on now, how does this work? God
It's
dang
just
it.
crazy, actually. Some of the things I
It's
read and some of
inescapable.
the arguments that people are having is just, it's unreal. Like, you know what? It's all right. And it's actually usual for everyone to have differing opinions, especially because none of us were there. So, you know,
And, exactly, and the fact that, especially when we're trying to discern the past, like you say, none of us were there. So I often compare it to like losing your keys at your friend's house. It's like if as many different ideas as we have to look for those keys is a good thing, right? So what we don't need is somebody saying, I know the keys, they're under the couch. Okay, we'll go get them. Well, they're under the couch. Just go look for them. Well, after the third time I've looked under the couch, it's like, hey, jackass, shut the fuck up. I'm trying to find the keys here.
yeah,
Don't care about your damn opinion.
yeah.
It's like battle lines have been drawn. Ricardo and I, we just did a show and we had Vince Barrows on, and man, the post, my ex has been blowing up like all night with this one archeo guy who has treated me quite respectfully, and I really can't say anything negatively personally about him, and he's kind of helped Ricardo and I out, right? Kind of the level of engagement you hope to see. But there's still things that get thrown out, man, like liar, right, at someone. They're throwing accusations. And why does it devolve to that point? Why do they seem to come equipped for a battle? At least that's sort of been my experience. I'm not equipped for battle. I'm equipped for people to make fun of me, but this whole battle they seem ready for, man, that it's kind of surprising to a lot of us.
It's really surprising. It's so a lot of people on our side of the fence in the Atlantis hunting community, a shitload of us are very hippie, very miss me with that negative energy, bro, kind of attitude. And so, I mean, I get the comments every single time I make a video that it mentions a negative personality or archaeology and any sort of negative light. I get just a shitload of comments of people that are just like, I don't know why you talk about these people. I don't know why you do. But, these guys, so everybody's got that attitude of like, I don't understand why these guys are doing this. And it's like, I get why they're doing it. I don't like why they're doing it. It's not a good reason, but I understand their justification. And I'm perfectly happy to roll in the mud with them like pigs, if that's what it takes to let other people. I mean, I've got things that I work on that are outside of arguing with people, but I don't have a pet hypothesis. And so like, I think that,
Right.
I think that's honestly something that it's a mixed bag when somebody has that. A true believer is easily fooled and will easily like not see, is very susceptible to not seeing things that they that tickle their confirmation bias. At the same time, a true believer is the one that's going to just keep looking at that problem. They're going to find those goddamn keys if they're in the room. If they believe they're in that room, they're going to find those fucking keys. So,
Mm-hmm.
again, I look at things from a very middle of the road perspective compared to other people, as far as a lot of that kind of stuff goes. So I'm happy to argue with these guys, even though a lot of people tell me that it's a waste of time or whatever.
Well, I think it's kind of breath of fresh air to say from an outside objective, right? I've only been on X Men since like January, and when I looked at your form of engagement, what I saw, I termed sort of the Loki role, and it was a role that was needed, right? And I don't mean the recent Marvel version, the old trickster, the god, right? The comedian. It's kind of a sacred role. You're willing to go in there to their level. And when they're throwing things like racism, there's nothing wrong with throwing retard right back at them. It's sort of they took it to that level, and honestly, that's what I have to say about that. And what I've admired about it is, the engagement. You're right. It's a distraction. But when you and your wheelhouse has sort of become, taking it to them in that Loki type affair, I think it's been needed in a breath of fresh air.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I think one of the most one of the biggest problems with this is that the academic world, that I cannot praise enough, because if we can do some research, it's because they produce some work and they produce some papers, and that's why we have some numbers and values and dates and so on. So I appreciate all of their work. Is what I see the problem is they are full of certainties and we are full of questions. So when we try to debate the questions, they come back, there's nothing to be discussed. Science is settled. Everything is resolved. There is no conflict in the data. Well, in the data that you are analyzing, how about this and that and that? So it's the questions that bothers them. And to me personally, and Jason was a witness to this, is that, for instance, in the last paper that I wrote, the critics that I got were the way I wrote it. Not a word about the data that was in it.
Style.
Right? The guy even told me, if you want to go into an academic discourse and discussion to be accepted, you have to write the proper way. So double lining was one of the things they used. I didn't use double space on the lines. What about the data? Okay, I'm here to debate the data. It's the questions that the paper raises that interest me. So, and who are these archaeologists or these academics that come into the fray for the expression? Are they the good ones? Are they really well intended, or are they a team that works in tandem just to destroy everything that comes out of alternative thinking, right? Because I think that, real academics are working. They don't have time to go to X, or they don't have time to engage in discussions. They are working. So there might be exceptions, and I don't doubt that there is. But I think the engagement that we get from academics is people that made their academic lives into criticizing everything and everybody because they know the answers. And they don't tell what those answers are, then they don't want to hear about your questions. They just want to criticize you.
That's right. To play devil's advocate for them, if you say, okay, it's public outreach, our job from an academic's perspective there, like John Hoops teaches at Kansas University, and he teaches these higher level classes for archaeology students that are how to address pseudo archaeology and how to use weaponized Wikipedia and all this kind of shit. And so if you play devil's advocate from his position, and if you're trying to do public outreach and you're trying to like make sure that the narrative is at least intact from an academic perspective, this whole engaging with the number one thing, they're well aware. Recently Flint was on one of these archaeology meetings talking about how Atlantis is the number one thing that people that are into ancient history and stuff believe in, that's considered quote unquote pseudo archaeology or whatever. It's like they know that there's people are super into this shit, and it's like, but you alienate us, you treat us like shit, you yell at us, you call us racists, you equate us with everything, misogyny and all the other buzzwords, and just throw the litany at us and then expect us to like even give two shits what you guys say. It's like if your job is to do public outreach, man, you guys really need to hire some handlers and get some people that like archaeologists to like design your fucking playbook, because it's not very good.
Well,
Yeah.
we're seeing them intentionally weaponize the technology. I mean, think of all the ways we can use this technology, right, to further any debate or any amount of human growth of knowledge, right? Instead, you've got, and I hope this John Hoops, who I checked out on Facebook when I saw you guys talking about him, I hope he's not representative of the mass of archaeology. But for an individual to then see, what can I do with this technology? I'm going to weaponize it against people, against their careers, and against this knowledge they're trying to put forward. What is that? Right? What type of human is that? And why are we allowing him a large space in the
That's
discourse?
two things there. One, he teaches students this stuff. So that's important to be aware of, is that he might not be indicative of archaeology as a whole, but he does have a direct influence in the next generation, and has for a while. The next thing that's worth pointing out when it comes to the guy is that his whole shtick with this stuff is to put these people out there and hide behind each other. Basically, like you say, they weaponize the technology. They've got how do you put it? We've had this whole like cultural shift in the mid 2000s with the beginning of social media, at the same time as like this serious anti-religious fervor in the wake of the whole 9/11 thing. And people it wasn't just anti-Islam. It was just fuck all those religions. Any of them that's going to get you to like want to kill somebody else over your God, to hell with that. Well, that you ended up with a bunch of people that left where my priest or the Bible or whatever is the path to truth. This is my touch sign to the universe or whatever. This is my way of reaching out to knowing what's true. They moved over to science. They moved over to scientists, and we had this whole generation of people that were very much about like science is perfect almost, and it's like the best that people can be. And now we have, the fact that we've got people that are pro-science communicators, quote unquote, and all they do is spew vitriol and yell, and they don't even, you watch their channel and there's really no science. They just yell at people, and they're successful YouTubers. That really kind of says it all. It's like it took over this emotional thing. And so a lot of these guys, they don't see it as, they can't not have the answer. That saying, we don't know yet, man. We don't even have a place to hang our hat, so we're just going to talk about it with our hat still on. Sorry, that's unacceptable if you're trying to be the oracle. That's the job that you accepted, being a scientist. So,
I think it's this weird intertwining between them believing in the science and coming up through university and getting their degree. They're invested financially and their time. And so now they're set apart. I'm an archaeologist. I've got a master's. I've got a PhD. So they're wholly invested in it. And then they're also seeing this. They feel they have to contend with people who have the ear of the general public, right? So all these people on social media have the ear of so many people, and if you're someone that invested all of that time, money, energy, your life really into being the authoritative voice on these topics, or at least being the representative of the people who are putting out the theories and writing the papers and doing the work, it's it's a little bit of jealousy, I think, because there's people who didn't have to invest the time, didn't have to invest the finances or the self-sacrifice, to get to that academic level, which when you're inside of that bubble, it's, if you want to be successful in academia, you really have to just go all the way inside that bubble and participate. And so
Play the game.
yeah, you have to play the game. And so they come out at the end of that game and they're successful and they've got their little plaque on the wall, and they feel they're not, so and so who is an archaeologist, they are archaeology. Like it becomes their persona, So they take such offense to anyone that can offer freely outside of academia and grants and, grandfather all the way down the line. anyone who can offer alternative theories without having any worries that they're going to be, going against the narrative that they're expected to toe. So
Right.
they're jealous, I think, in a lot of ways,
No.
that they're jealous of the space
Yeah.
that alternative theorists have, and the success, and the way that they've been able to drum up a lot of interest, especially in the last 10 to 15 years. It's become more and more popular, and I think they have a real problem with that. Like you said, they do speak. Hoops is one, sure, but I'm currently an anthropology student, and I can tell you I do get information from my university about how to interact in social media. They're concerned about it. It's something that they worry about, and
Wow.
something that is addressed. Maybe not directly, because I'm very early on in my education, but if you're at a PhD level, absolutely, I believe that they are very concerned about how you present yourself publicly and how you interact with people who have the ear of the public. It's
Yeah, I absolutely believe that. If you look, I talk about it quite a bit actually. If you look back 20 years, the scientists that we saw, scientists in general tend to be, the better somebody is, the more nerdy they are at science, the more socially awkward they tend to be. And so you get to this point where you really need somebody else to be a filter to the public, because they're talking on a different level. Especially you start getting into somebody that's talking physics. It's like watch PBS Space Time, and I forget the dude's name, but that guy they've got on there he's barely able to make it translatable to an idiot like me, right? Just barely.
Sure.
He's still too smart.
Right.
So my point is you get these people that traditionally science just kind of hid these guys away. It's like, you'll go work on a paper and we'll have Carl Sagan come out and talk to the public. And maybe if somebody really wants to see you, they can stay up till 2 a.m. and turn on PBS and they'll see you. But nowadays, the same platform allows my dumb ass to get out there and yell at the world, lets them do the same. And some of these people, it's like they're, again, it's really, really good at doing whatever in the lab, but then you put them in they're never going to pick somebody up in a bar. We'll put it that way. Right.
So socially awkward, I think, is certainly a part of it, right? That's why I call X like the lunchroom. It's kind of where all these, right? It's kind of what it reminds me of when I engage with them, and I expect that behavior. But also, look, when I try to define what I'm seeing in their behavior, Dan, and what all of you hit on, is I kind of see the shackles, right? So anytime you shackle yourself to an institution, to an entity, right? Whatever it is, look around the world, whether it's people in government, people with religion, right? Wherever it is, you not only are sort of shackled and bound by that, you can't be out here with us with our sort of non-shackled free thinking, right? But also, what have they learned from their examples? Look at St. Mark's, right? Who is it, Dan, the Bluefish Caves, right? When any one of them turns against them, what happens? When someone turns against what he's chained to, those chains yank back, right?
Yeah.
And they punish you. So now they're in this predicament where they're trying to come out here and engage freely, right? They're bound by what they're supposed to, these books tell them, but also they've learned, man, if they even step foot over here and start going, well, you're kind of saying something that makes sense, that chain is going to start exacting its toll,
Well, it's like return on investment. Like I said,
Yeah.
do you know how expensive it is to get a PhD? Like unless they're willing to really put themselves out there and establish that connection with the public, it's really difficult to make it on your own. You have to go do independent research. You have to write your own books. You have to self-publish, because no one will touch you. So it's very lonely out there. It's a very brave soul that is willing to step over the line and say, you know what, keep your funding. I know what I know, and you're not going to change my word about it.
Yeah.
So it's difficult because they create this like safe space, right? That's even the lingo that they use and that they kind of teach within the academic environment. That's why they come at us with words like "you're a liar," "you're a racist," because that's the shit that they learn. That's what they're taught within the academic space over the course of years. By the time you get your PhD, how many years have they had you? Not to mention, they've already been pre-prepared and pre-groomed, if you will, coming up through the public school system. So by the time they come out with that piece of paper, they're told you're special, you're this, and and you belong with us in our group. And so I just find it's one of those things that I think we're never ever going to be completely rid of under the current structured system that we use for granting, like, you get a PhD and you get a PhD.
Right.
Like, you have to play along. If you're not, I've actually encountered online over the years several people that they're brilliant researchers, but at the end of the day, and just before crossing the line, they were told you can't act like that. Or people that realize when they get right to the finish line, like, I actually don't want that piece of paper because I don't want to be lumped in with those people, and it's not what they thought it was.
Yeah.
So I do actually have a level of compassion. It's difficult sometimes based on the way some people act, but I do have a level of compassion because it's expensive, it's time, and it's a portion of your life. And even if you have like this tiny spark of passion about the subject, archaeology, anthropology, paleontology, whatever it is that you're into, it's almost like
It's going to crush it out of you.
it crushes out of you because
Mm-hmm.
this is my second round. I went to school to be a nurse. So I've done that. I've gone and worked in a field and walked away from it for personal reasons. It's difficult to let go of everything that they've put into you and everything that you've put into it. So I do have a kind of unique insight into seeing, like, I see the way that they act and I think, oh my God, like, here we go again. But
Yeah.
I do sort of get it. Some people are more persistent than I can actually believe. But I mean,
Yeah.
names don't need to be named. We all know who they are. But yeah.
Jack St. Mars, for example, like you're talking about how people getting reined in and that rope pulling them back, or you being forced to stand in a certain area. He loved to go. He found the Bluefish Caves actually on his own time. Like he would go hiking in the summer and just kind of like, and then he found these caves, and then he goes back when school's on and he's got some funding, but he's already done some of this legwork. And if you ask somebody who's, that they're one of the debunker types, they'll say, oh, his career wasn't ruined. His career was fine. They put him in charge of a museum. You know what a great job of being a museum curator? Do you know what a prestigious position that is? It's like, yeah, we've all watched the 80s cop movie where the rogue cop gets pulled in and given a desk job. We know exactly what happened here. We're not stupid, guys. I mean, I'm not saying that Hollywood's indicative of reality, but we know exactly what happened here. This is quite clear. He went and he complains about it. He complained about it up until he passed. So it's not like this is me making it up or assuming it. This is stuff that he said it. His protege said it. It's an unfortunate reality. If you look, it's not. This isn't new. This isn't like, it's worse. It goes up and down with the level of politics of the time, and politics is bad right now. But, if people forget, though, this shit's been crazy forever. You go back to World War I, we had freedom cabbage, for fuck's sake. All right. It's not like a freedom fry shit's new. It's like, you can't have sauerkraut when we're fighting the Germans. This is freedom cabbage. So
same mechanism. Yes.
I'm not
same
joking.
Mechanism.
Yeah.
Same mechanism plus the internet. That's all.
Exactly. The internet just distills the stuff and lets the goofy motherfuckers all get into one corner. The flat earthers and whatnot, the people that are just like, you know what I really think's going on here? And it's like some wacky shit. It's like there's only 17 people on the planet that believes that, but they've all in their own little subreddit and they've got their own little Discord, and so now it feels like the whole world's those 17 people, right? that's the only thing. It's in my chat. I mean, we saw that.
You know who you are.
In the early 2010s, I think we saw a ton of that because a lot of the really goofy sides of a lot of ideologies and stuff, a lot of these really weird things, like furries going mainstream, for example. That was like, we all knew they existed if you spent time on the internet, but now all of a sudden it's like you might see them at Walmart. It's like, what the fuck, man? What happened to the world?
We let them out.
Well, they were talking to those same 17 people, and
Yeah.
so when they walked out of they were surprised that one of them wasn't at the Walmart. They were like,
Yeah.
I'm the only one in town? What the hell? Every time I turn on my computer, the place is full of these guys."
Yeah.
And people are, even if they recognize that that's not the way it is, people have a hard time. Like, you can tell, you can say something all day long, but people a lot of times have a hard time like understanding what they're actually seeing there, even if they do recognize. Just because something's trying to politically program you, for example, doesn't mean that you're immune to that program. It just means that you're aware
Definitely
it's
not.
happening, right?
Yeah.
It just means you're aware it's happening.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people mistake belief for knowledge, right? So if you manage to create a world fund to put those 17 people into a rocket, so they go into space and show them the Earth from there, they'll still say, "Oh, that's just an illusion. It is created."
That's right.
So they wouldn't believe it just the same. So there is no point in debating these people, because it's a belief system. It's not based on facts. It doesn't survive observational with your naked eye. So it's irrelevant. And there is part of that in academia. But the point I was to bring, and all of that has been said about academics so far. My question is, I understand all of that, but when some of them thought, let's create a wall of shame and let's spend our time, instead of doing proper research, let's just be awful to people, right? Let's criticize their looks. Let's call them ignorance. We don't even need to read what they're saying. It just, if one of the group says, "Oh, let's do this week," right? So how occupied are these people that have the time and have the personality to have fun making jokes about other people in a private space that makes it even worse, right? It makes no sense to me. It doesn't help the discussion. And I think they are forgetting. If we go and research how many times in the last 200 to 300 years science was wrong and the independent thinker was correct or proven correct afterwards, right? The list will be 30, 40 pages. And it's just one line for each one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So shouldn't they take that in consideration? Should the doubt be, what is the scientific method? Is to constantly prove itself wrong. It's what it's supposed to be. It's not what they turn into is to prove themselves right. So if you're right, then there is no more debate. So everybody that comes and proposes a new thing or a new solution to the same problem, it's immediately rejected because it's already done. We already have the answers, right? And when did this happen? This happened because they decided to engage into a materialistic uniformitarian way of thinking that justifies and explains every single thing by the data observed in the last 200 years. So they're trying to explain thousands, if not millions of years of history by what they observed and collected in the last 200 years, because the rest is irrelevant, because it didn't follow the scientific method, because it didn't follow the correct methodology. So all of this, they are now, instead of being that solid institution that we can go to debate and research information, they are now a religion.
Oh yeah,
They
in a lot of ways,
abandon, by trying so hard to eliminate God and create science, they turn science into another religion, and that's what crushed them, right? So
yeah, I can't argue with that. Yeah.
Pride. It is, like you say, it's narrative blindness. I'll turn it over to Dan, but all of this is what I hear is narrative blindness, no matter what that narrative is. If it's the earth's flat, if it's, whatever, I won't, call it any religion here, but whatever your narrative is. And like Ricardo said, it's what we see these academics, their narrative, they're so invested into that box where they're important. That box is the matrix, right? It's constructed in all these ways. Like you mentioned, St. Mark's, all of these ways, which they keep you in that box. And then if you want to step out and come out here with us, you're not able to, because you've rebound to those confines. You've got that narrative blindness in operation.
Yeah, but it's also imperative to the way that they function, right? So, like when I was speaking before, like about their theories being grandfathered, like your funding is based on like you are proposing ideas
That's
based
true.
on
That's
the guy
true.
before you and the guy before that and the guy before that and the guy before that. So it comes all the way down the line, and the grants and the funding and the interest and the self-interest of the universities and the way that they conduct research and the way they allocate money, like
Follow the
it,
money every time.
yeah, it's about the money. Like, so, and if you want to work, unless you just want to teach, you know what I mean? If you
Yeah.
actually just want to go out and do some work, otherwise you're stuck in the university teaching. Like, you have to say that the last 10 guys who came before you knew what the hell they were talking about. Because
Well, yeah.
if you say that they don't, then they're like, okay, we'll just find somebody who will say that they know what they're talking about and give them the money, you know?
Yep.
Well, they end up with these paradigms that actually do cock block us from new knowledge. Like with
Yes.
Easter Island's a great example, because they had this, for some reason, there was this weird dogma with Easter Island that they couldn't accept the fact that the people from Easter Island, the people that found Easter Island, they assumed came from Polynesia.
Hmm.
They couldn't accept the fact that these people would have found the Americas, which to me is absurd. I mean, if you look at a map, they find this little pinpoint. I'm pretty sure they could find this giant fucking landmass a
Massive
little bit
land
further. Yeah.
mass, like, yeah.
But then, and Thor Heyerdahl, who was the guy who did the Kon-Tiki voyage, if you guys are aware what that is, he was proved that like you could cross the ocean with a raft, basically. Did that before I was born.
Yeah, yeah.
And so he was already a little bit like, just proving that already got even some ire with anthropologists and stuff, because he was basically kicking at the tires of their arguments to begin with, saying, we can push people across a lot further. We can assume people went a lot further than you guys are assuming. And one of the things he talked about was Easter Island, and said that it looks like there was Polynesian. There was the same kind of architecture on Easter Island in places that we saw in South America. So he posited there was a connection, and people laughed at him. This is all just goofy woo bullshit. Well, just this last year, there was a paper published, 2 papers published, actually. One of them was, they had all these stone blades, all these scrapers, and they started testing all of the genetic evidence that was on them, what they'd peeled off of things over the years. And these came from the lowest habitable layer, which is the lowest place that we know of people being on that island. So the earliest that people were there, which this is about 1,200 years ago, I think. But anyway, these had stuff from both. They had both ginger and sweet potato. These people, the first people that were there that we know of, had both contact with Asia and South America. It's kind of a no-brainer, but it took genetic evidence to get us there, because they were cock blocking observations that they would have accepted had they both been on the same continent. They wouldn't have argued at all that those architectural styles were connected. And Easter Island's out in the middle of nowhere, so it's like this is a great. We see this kind of thing happen over and over again, and this directly affects funding. They're closing a lot of these archaeological institutions, or a lot of departments around the world right now in the Western world. We see a lot of these being because of funding, and again, it's not a secret that Atlantis and all of that kind of ancient aliens and all the woo there's a lot of money in that. But they're not going. They would rather shutter their doors than work with the interested amateur. And if you look at the Society for American Archaeology, if you go back to their very first constitution, their very first set of bylaws, the number one thing that it's like, this is what we're here to do, boys. It is to basically foster a relationship between professional archaeologists and interested amateurs, and get us all to sing Kumbaya together. And we'll educate you guys, and you can help fund us. And it's always worked that way in the past.
Right. Because in the early days, like think early ethnology, etc., and people going out and digging. In the early days, the whole framework that we've built to make archaeology, and it's not a science, it's an arts degree, people. You can specialize, but it's an arts degree. Like the whole thing was so dependent on the interested amateur, the enthusiast. Those were the people that were bringing, look what I found, look at this. Because the academics were in school and they were teaching, and they were, dedicated to one site where they could demonstrate methods to students. But, as people were settling 150 years ago and plowing new fields and moving out of like the more populated areas, they were finding things and bringing them to the Smithsonian and bringing them to the local university, and we were so dependent on those discoveries. So yes, early archaeology was to like bridge that gap between someone who's just interested or, enthusiastic, and someone who had a formal education so it could be properly documented for the consumption of everybody.
Yeah.
So
Well, I
yeah.
mean, as far as the money side of things go, I mean, it's long. I often cite the fact that the Giza Plateau has been carbon dated twice, and both times it's come at the David Koch Foundation and the Edgar Cayce Foundation. Right? I mean, these both times they're looking for some 10,000-year-old dates. They were hoping to find Atlantis stuff, right? And
Mhm.
you go back even further, you go to the 1930s and stuff, and it's the Paracas skulls, the elongated skulls from down in Peru. Those, Rockefeller was the first person from the rich white part of the world to throw money at that stuff, and they were in during the Depression, man. They were fucked down there. They were like $300 a year in funding, and Rockefeller's like, "How's 40 grand?" They're like, "Oh my god, what skulls
Right.
do you want? Pick 10. I don't care."
Yeah, it changed everything for them. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been that way forever. It's archaeology started all the way back. It started as a way for antique collectors to be able to catalog their goods. It's like, where does this Roman pot fit next to this Roman pot, fit next to this Etruscan pot? And now it's they tried to make it into a science, and it's informed by science. It's absolutely informed by science, but so is phrenology. I mean, I don't know what to tell you, right? You can inform anything by. I've seen all kinds of goofy ass white supremacists inform their views by science. Anybody can cherry pick shit to make it say what they want. The problem is when you forge a narrative and you're telling a story, like you said, it's about jealousy. I've said this on a bunch, that Graham Hancock writes a fiction. The archaeologist writes a fiction. Graham Hancock's fiction sells more books. He's not got the proper credentials. This is double insult to injury. We just can't have this. So
Yes.
he must be a racist.
He must be.
Yeah.
Clearly.
Gotta be.
Clearly a racist.
Unbelievable.
Imagine you spend 4+ years in a university just fucking sleeping in your books, living, breathing in your books, and your mom is like so proud. Your mom's like, "Oh, my baby is in college and he's gonna be an archaeologist and all this straight A's and finally graduated and all that." I mean, you gotta uphold that, Your grandma's proud of you, and you better have an opinion, and you need to come in and challenge all these people and put them in their place so that they
Mommy,
can say, "Look
they're
what my baby
racist."
did." Yeah.
Mommy.
It's all ego. It's ego.
It's ego, right? Empathy is important, but empathy gets us so far, right? Back to you just mentioned, Dan, I was going to ask you about your post on X about the birthplace of archaeology, right? And so I had a question for you. Is you'd also mentioned before that, about the DNA evidence being required for the trans-Pacific, right, journeys and all, because they were cock blocking so hard. How is it that this, if we call it whatever it is, this field of archaeology, birthed of, as you say, antiquities needing cataloging, how is it they are in a position to literally cock block the advancement of knowledge about the human story? How do they find themselves in this place of power where what they say is 100%, no matter what other correlating fields of science might have to say on the matter?
Well, I kind of had a weird perspective on this because I've been online for a long time, and I watched I draw a lot of parallels with this with like the VHS collecting community or the video game collecting community, because we saw a lot of things that just kind of pop up that people didn't know what it was, right? It's just like, here's something that's in a corner that we couldn't, First of all, the community knows better than any archivist. There's going to be historians out there that think that they know, that they've accessed all of Hasbro's archives, and they'll tell you when they made what Star Wars toy when. But then you go talk to the guy that's my age or 5 years older than me, who's been collecting this shit since the '80s, and he'll know way more than that guy.
Yeah.
But the communities, the thing is, as the community takes hold, that guy that I just described, this hypothetical person, you'll end up with these people that are in positions of de facto leader roles. This is the guy. I mean, you see it on the internet in all of these communities, right? Like in our community, there's people that are leaders, and there's people that are followers, and there's people, however you want to look at it. With the archaeological community, with that stuff in general, the gatekeeping is pretty hefty. Go to the Met or something and look at the stuff that they have there, and how much of it's on loan, and how much of it was donated. And then I walked through their Egyptology department for 3 hours, was just blown away. And then I was just talking to Adam Young, and he was telling me how it's like, oh yeah, that's the leftovers, man. That was the Met got a late start, and this is the dregs. This is shit that the other museums were like, we're not going to hire somebody to glue that back together. So the Met was like, well, we'll get some student to do it. So, my point is that we're in a position like anything else where they've been kind of handing this crown on down the road. And I think the problem, I could be wrong, but I think the problem seems to have started during the 60s and 70s during the counterculture thing, where there was because there was a lot of serious goofy woo that came out of that time that was being couched as science, right? There's a lot of you want to read some goofy ass papers, man. Read some psychology papers from the 70s. It'll blow your damn mind. It'll blow your damn mind that people were getting paid for that, the Timothy Leary crap. But
right.
But again, when they're in positions of somebody's in a position of power, then you pass it on to the next person and stuff. They tend to close ranks. They tend to, it's us versus them. And these guys are, at some point they decided that this was a science. Not that they were going to use science. They decided that this was a science. And I think that's where, you got a lot of people that are going to swear up and down that the emperor is wearing clothes at this point.
It's the perfect way to say it. It's like, Ricardo, you and I are always hopping on. You don't need to call it a conspiracy where money, interest, and power converge, and you see that in archaeology, as you just, laid out for us precisely, is whether it's on the individual or collective level, money, power, and all these people's collective time and energy, it's just right there. So what do you get? You get a conspiracy full of gatekeeping, narrative blindness, and as Dan so eloquently terms it, cock blocking the advancement of the story,
that is a scientific term, by the way.
It is. I think, and that says it better than,
That's what that Alice in Chains song was about, with the snuffing of the rooster and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's another reason I identify with you, Dan. It's the Gen X, man. The references and the way you talk, bro.
Well, thanks.
It says it.
I was in a bar, it was 6 months ago, and there was a bunch of 20-somethings talking about the gorillas. And so they were debating amongst themselves and looking at websites. So I started talking to them a little bit about it. And after about 10 minutes, I felt this weird feeling of I was just let me dispense the knowledge to you, seer.
One of the points that is important in their frustration is, if we go to the 80s, 90s, they were the vehicle that was conveying science in a way that everybody could understand. And they did it through Carl Sagan, for instance, that wrote many books, was among the first books I ever read. And the man was a communicator. He could have been also terrible to independent researchers, as they call, for instance, from Velikovsky. He treated him very poorly, but he was a communicator of science. So science had the lead in publishing science material that everybody could read and understand, that is not on a scientific paper. And all of a sudden, that talent was gone. And so what happened is we have these new authors coming on, like Graham Hancock, for instance, but there are others.
Sure.
Robert Duvall, John Anthony West, that start coming up, and people, because they didn't have other materials, start looking into let's see who is these people, and let's start reading. And so the narrative was taken from the scientific group into those non-scientific that start publishing books about science and archaeology and history, right? And they lost their control. And I think that's what they are sored about, and because they don't have anyone to do it. Neil deGrasse Tyson is, I don't even want to say anything. And the boy that does that documentaries on television is Brian Cox. I don't know his correct name. I'm not sure.
Yeah, Brian Cox. Yeah,
he's a little bit better, right? But he's still he doesn't have the passion or the talent of Carl Sagan. None of them have. So where do we look
to? The system destroys the passion, Ricardo, right? I mean, as Jacqueline pointed out, right? It's grinding this passion out of them. And so naturally, when you've got a Graham Hancock that arises, who not only is going around researching, putting all this information out in such a scientific way, he's writing it in such a way, right, that takes the reader on the journey with him. I don't want to steal the floor, but Dan, you're a reader of the books, and not many people had read the books. I remember, I think it was Supernatural, where he's talking about the Hypogeum, right, in Malta. And he's describing the possibility that allegedly the guy who ran the museum had rubbed away some cave art, right? Now, the way Graham structures the story and runs you through those paragraphs and a half, I stopped. I had literal chills run through my body because I understood in the way he structured it in that instant that meant cavemen found this place 30,000 years ago and thought it was a cave, right? It's just, he walks you through that narrative and gets you there in ways that, as you say, nobody who has part of a system that is bent to destroy passion. Take us back to St. Mark's. Why did they start off mad with him? Probably because he went and found that shit on his own. You know, it's so anybody who's coming in with some passion and an actual story to tell. And thankfully, I'll end with this. Thankfully, these guys aren't equipped with one of those, right? Because the story they have to tell is bullshit anyhow. Right. And so thankfully they have not been equipped with, orators and narrators and leaders like Graham, to help show it the way so precisely.
Well, Graham also has this unique quality. I mean, he's the combination of his personality type and his writing background. He, if and where it's available, he presents facts because of his investigative journalism background. And when he's theorizing, he is very open about that and always states, it could be, like, the language that he uses creates possibility for people to imagine what could be, which is very engaging for people, not just enthusiasts or lay people, but academics also. I would say that I would consider myself someone that really, I can theorize, but I really rely heavily on facts to base my theories off of. I'm not completely on the side of woo-woo. I like to have a good foundation before, and I find Graham's writing to be extremely engaging. And as a young person who didn't have any formal education, and as an adult who does have formal education, and really now more so that I understand and have, a good foundation of the history that he's actually talking about, I like Graham now better than I did when I was a kid because I can appreciate it. So someone like Graham is such an easy target for people who don't have that passion, like you were saying, Jason, where it's been ground out. They've told, like, it's death by 1,000 cuts, right? Like, it gets taken away from them.
And a lot of them don't have the skill set to begin with. Like I was saying earlier, a huge portion. A guy like Brian Cox is a great example. He's really, watch him talk, and you see if he's in any sort of interview, you can see anytime he goes stream of consciousness, he fucking loses everybody in the room just like that. He's just like, everybody's like, what? Fucking what? Okay, man. Anyway, talk to me about Pokemon, Brian. Come on, back to reality here, buddy. But I think a lot of
get down the mountain.
Yeah. But I think a lot of the issue as well is that, when the narrative shifted with UFOs, for example, Carl Sagan stepped in, and this was had already been, UFOs were all the buzz for 30 years at that point. He realized that if he wanted to educate people on this sort of science, this astronomy, that this was the gateway drug. This was how to get them in. And there, John Hoops has said this, that he got into Atlantis was something that got him into it. He wrote a paper on Atlantis when he was like 13 years old in school. Flint Dibbles acknowledged that he is one of the few archaeologists that got into it that wasn't into pseudo archaeology before he got involved. They all recognize that the fun part of the story, the fun part of the space stories, a guy who goes to work at NASA does not sit around all day thinking about aliens when they're at work. They're thinking about their job. But when they're at home, when they were 12, thinking about one day becoming that aliens was what was getting them there, right? And Sagan fucking knew that. And I have to say this too, though, as much as I'll toot Sagan's horn about like getting that part of it, he was that way if you were into UFOs, but if you were into astrology, he was going to come at you with both barrels. He was not going to give you any empathy whatsoever. Fuck you, right? But if you were into UFOs, no, he was all right. He would give you all kinds of leeway. I used a clip in one of my videos talking about him because it was so funny, because the guy asked him, he's like, what kind of technology can we expect him to have around Alpha Centauri? And you could just see it in his face, because he's just like, immediately like, how the fuck should I know, man? Let me just ask, well, but he doesn't answer that way. He's like, well, it's been around 1 billion years longer than us. We can assume that they would have, he doesn't just say, you fucking idiot, shut up. He answers their question.
He engaged with them
in a manner that will, like, you've got you could be karate or jujitsu with it, right? You could punch them in the face, or you could use their momentum and let them run down the hill. Example that I talk about a lot was, I watched Jimmy Corsetti on Twitter he was talking about the Nephilim in the Bible, and he said maybe these were Neanderthal. Maybe these were the Denisovans, and all these archaeologists and stuff, because it's Jimmy, of course, they're going to come at him with both, pitchforks and torches. But they're like, hey, man, Denisovans and Neanderthals were smaller than Cro-Magnon. What are you, stupid? This is blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, you could go that route, or you could say, both of these hominids that you mentioned are too small. However, there was like Gigantopithecus, and there was some other ones. Maybe you could take his interest and slightly redirected, and next thing you know, he's doing his own research based on your slight correction. And I would call that science education. But instead, you could just be like, hey, you're a fucking idiot, Jimmy. And then he's like, okay, block button, carry on.
Imagine using your knowledge for good, to be helpful.
What's wrong with imagination in science? As you say with Jimmy's theory, no matter where I have to go with it scientifically, what's wrong with getting a bunch of people to look into who the hell were the Denisovans?
Like what's that they say, each one teach one?
Yeah.
Could we try that? Let's try that.
Right.
But I don't see any, and to me, the way, say my goal is to, in that case, my goal is to completely debunk the Nephilim. Now, my goal when I engage with Jim is not to just debunk the idea that Denisovans and Neanderthals and Nephilim. I just want to blast the idea that Nephilim ever existed. Isn't the best way to do that, in Jim's mind, to send him down the rabbit hole of researching all these different hominids on his own till he comes to the conclusion that the Nephilim were bullshit? Or should I just call him an idiot and get him to block me? I don't know. It's a complicated choice there. I'm not sure which button to press.
And that would necessitate someone interested in educating and further someone's knowledge advancement. That would be a requirement for that behavior.
Like somebody who worked, I don't know, at a university as an educator, like, for example. I mean, fuck.
To name a few.
But at that point, it's like, and I'll be fair. There's no reason to expect them to be educated. They don't have to be their professional selves when they're on the internet. Right. I'm not the one that put freaking anthropologist, archaeologist, yada, yada, yada next to their name. Right. I'm not the one that goes around they're the one that goes around everything, conflating their livelihood with their personal life. Well, if that's, that's not my fault that you're doing that. You'll have your personal account and your professional account then, but it's not like that. Which is why they do the racism thing. Like, that it's not just because they've been trained to do that, although that is a big part of it. The reason is because if I tell you, hey, man, this guy was over there and he's got some wrong opinions about the Great Pyramid. Okay. My uncle did on Thanksgiving. I don't give a fuck. Like, oh yeah, but these ones are racist wrong opinions about Thanksgiving, about the pyramids. Like, oh, it's racist. Well, okay, maybe 70-80% are going to be like, okay, dude, whatever. But some people are going to be like, okay, well, I can see why you're interested in combating this guy's opinions on the pyramids, right? And so you get to recruit a few people that way, and at the very least, you can justify your otherwise abhorrent behavior. Because I mean, let's be honest, you're talking to people that have some like a belief in something. So you go after these guys and they're like, if it was like, hey man, my favorite role-playing game is Final Fantasy, and the other people, oh no, Final Fantasy is a terrible game. Okay, well, if I went to the subreddit of the Final Fantasy fans and was just like, Final Fantasy is a shit game, people would look at me like I was fucking weird. They'd be like, man, why the fuck do you
Yes,
go to
they
the Final
would.
Fantasy? But if I was like, Final Fantasy's racist.
Listen,
Okay,
man,
well,
Final Fantasy 1 and 2 on Nintendo, we're gonna have words, Dan. Okay, that was. I don't know what the hell they did with it after that, but
yeah, that the first one I played a lot. 7 was the one that my brother was into. The Super Nintendo era was about the only thing I played on that a lot back in the day was the fighting Street Fighter 2 and Mario. The other ones were taking too much time. I was 16 in 91, so at that point there was way too much to do besides just playing video games.
But I was just a little younger, so man, having Final Fantasy in my pocket when Game Boy came out made me useless because I could take that to school and Dungeons and Dragons was ready on the board when I got home. So that's
nice.
Oh man! One question: imagine that you are an author and you want to write about history or science, right? And you go and you contact these people that you think are the experts on the matter, and they will utterly reject you. So you go to the other tier. Doesn't mean that they know less, but they might have different opinions because they are academics that are not in the circle. They are not accepted. They reject their papers because he thinks differently. And you speak to those people, and those people often have more communicative skills. They don't mind to be on camera and explain their points of views, right? And then because you write what you learn from those academics, although they are outside the circle, when you publish your material, it is the very circle of academics that will reject your material because you are talking to academics that we don't like. We don't like that guy. So we saw that happen lots of times with Graham Hancock, for instance, because he's talking to academics. It's an archaeologist. This is there explaining his ideas about the site. And he said, oh, that guy isn't recognized by us. He's in charge of the excavation. Yeah, but we don't like him. We don't like him just the same. Right. So it borders the ridicule. It's beyond reasonable or sense. Is just they are being so protected by something that they caused, because I don't doubt, in fact we know, for instance in case of Graham Hancock, he tried to speak with what's the name of the Egyptian guy, Dr.
Zahi.
Dr. Zahi. How many times he tried to speak and learn from the man and document, right? And that happens so many other times that people go to these people to learn from them and to have material to write about, and they reject it because I'm not interested in that. There is nothing to be debated or explained, right? And so you have to go somewhere to get that information, right? And then you criticize you because that academic is not recognized. For instance, us in the Institute, we'd had at least 4 academics that come to us and say, well, I created this paper and I submitted it, but it's rejected. For instance, we have this guy that created a new kind of mathematics that he applied to ancient sites, right? And each time he applied that equation to the dimensions and geometry of the site, he gets a series of numbers. And then he input those numbers, and those numbers lead him to another site. And then he applies to that site the same equation, and he goes to another site, right? So he wrote a huge thesis because he's an academic, and presented it with the mathematics, the monuments, and the methodology that he was using. And they said to him, well, we like your paper, but you can't include the ancient sites. I can't? No, because they didn't know mathematics. So you cannot make a correlation between mathematics and the sites. And he said, okay, so I will remove the ancient sites and just use the mathematics to prove my point. And he did. And he presented a new paper, very much reduced, and he once again put it to peer review. And they answered, we like your paper very much, but there is a problem. The mathematics that you're describing have not been invented yet. So the paper was rejected. Of course, it's invented. It's here. It's just check if the numbers are correct or not. No, that mathematics doesn't exist. Why? Because he's not in their circle, right? So the person that I just wrote the last paper about,
like a religion.
Yeah, this
Dogmatic.
transatlantic contact. This lady is now probably 70 years. She has been a respected academic all her life. And the last post on X is, my last paper was rejected by the community because they don't accept my hypothesis. So how many academics, it's not just the independent researcher, how many academics are rejected constantly in their thesis and their ideas and we don't even know about them because some of them get depressed or whatever and forget it, or just assume, okay, I just wrote about what you want and that way I can get published. So it doesn't happen only to independent researchers. It happens to lots of academics. I think to the majority of them. They learn quickly. They have to follow the rules.
It happens even, a great example of this is Dr. Elizabeth Weiss. She's I
love her.
Anthropologist. And while I disagree with her position on NAGPRA, I also would, if I was an anthropologist, I would probably have her position on NAGPRA. It's, you know, a lot of people talk about, to draw a parallel, when I worked as an electrician, fuck OSHA, but a lot of people, have no problem with OSHA, but that's great. But the problems, I had plenty of problems with OSHA, and there's a reason. The guys got between me and getting my fucking job done. And so I get where NAGPRA would irritate an anthropologist. But because she has a problem with NAGPRA, they fucked her funding up on all kinds of stuff, to the point where she ended up suing the university she was working at and all kinds of things. It's like, well, this is, at this point, that's insane. Okay, she being accused again of racism type of stuff, and she's walking a thin line. I get it. The tribal stuff. Living in the part of the country I do, tribal, if you look into this stuff at all, you instantly become acutely aware of tribal politics. But I could get, I could go walk and in 20 minutes go to a tribal center. They're all over the city. The tribes own, they're very powerful and wealthy in this part of the country. So,
I'm here.
When they play the NAGPRA game, if they play the NAGPRA card, they can tie up a site indefinitely just because they've got the money to fight. There's no institution that's going to, even the federal government's going to, eventually capitulate because of how much money they can just. Well, that arrowhead's a grave good. Let's go. Oh, nope, that one's not. Okay, how about this one? Until you eventually either capitulate this site or we'll find a grave good, because that's really all it takes. That's the standard. Is if there's the site's a grave site, falls under NAGPRA. If it's not,
it's done for.
If it's not, then it's not. But if they'll argue, that's an arrow. That arrowhead's a grave good. Let's take it to court. We'll fight about it. And deep pockets. Most universities are never. They won't even go. They'll just be like, all right, you win.
They just give up right away. Yeah.
Well, it's expensive, and you don't want a university that's working. This isn't the only time this university has been working with this tribe, and it's not the last time they're going to work with this tribe. Last thing you want to do is start fighting these guys in court. You want to be. There's a great example is the East Wenatchee Clovis site up here had the biggest Clovis points that were found, like some huge Clovis points, so big that they think they were made for like instructional, like an oversized alphabet to teach a kid how to write. They think this was like to teach a kid how to flint knap. And that site, the guy that was the property owner was working with local archaeologists who were working with the tribes, and everything was going well, except he wanted to open a visitor center and make tourism money. So he brought in an archaeologist from New York, and it took that guy all 2 weeks to piss off the tribes. And they were like, yeah, fuck off. And they closed this. It was like 88, 89 when they closed it. And then NAGPRA was passed in 90. And it's like, this site's indefinitely closed now. And it's all because of one archaeologist not navigating that system, right? So it's a hairy mess. But I can see why Elizabeth Weiss would be pissed off about it again. I totally get where she's coming from, and that's with, if I was a Native American, I would consider, and I would, especially if I was in contact with the tribes and stuff where I considered myself, like I was culturally a Native American as well as by blood. There ain't no fucking way I'm going to cough up any control over anything that I have. I live in an occupied country, kiss my ass. So I get where they're coming from 100%. But I think that ability to look at it from her perspective and the tribe's perspective is something that I shouldn't be able to toot my horn for having that in this modern day, but I definitely, most people don't do that. They look at it from one person's perspective and the other person's just a piece of shit. Elizabeth's a racist. The tribes are anti-scientific idiots.
And look, they're not, man. Even the tribes, right, around here, even the tribes are a mixed bag, I identify by blood, right, not at any official level, right, and spiritually. So listen, here's a problem I have. I go over to the casino, Dan, right over here on the Coosa River, where, you guys see me work there all the time in the river. What I happen upon is I'm walking into the casino, I see a sign that says, hey, go this way for the sacred ceremonial circle, right? And I'm thinking, okay, first of all, I want to see this. Second of all, how far is it? And man, I walk like 50 feet, and I'm in this sacred mound circle, right? And I look 50 feet that way, and there's the parking deck, and there's the casino going up 100 stories, right? How sacred was this site, that you put this here, right? And so it's just, once money gets involved, man, the interests just start going different places.
Well, there's you ever watch that TV show Yellowstone with Kevin Costner?
Yeah,
I haven't yet. No.
I haven't watched a whole lot of episodes, but I watched the first few of them are available on planes, and so you got something to watch. And there's the dude in there that's in charge of the tribes. Like one of the first few episodes, this guy's a college boy that comes in and takes over the tribe as the chief, and he tells him point blank, he's like, "You guys stole our land. We're going to take this tax-free money that you give us, and we're going to buy it the fuck back from you," just like that. And so, and honestly, fuck yeah, dude. If I
I mean, look, I was proud of that casino, Dan. In my mind's eye, as I'm sitting there on the river and I'm looking across it, there's these huge pecan orchards, right, that I knew were old and ancient, and I'm looking up at this penthouse. In my mind's eye, the chief is up there, smoking his cigar, looking out at his land, surveying, just going, "We won," right?
Yep.
But then I start investigating reality, and I realize what's going on with why are there police here? This is federal land. Oh, they're involved in illegal shit. Wait a minute. They don't care about the mounds, right? And I had to kind of rewire and go, but my mind's eye, the fact that they do deserve to win is not really how they're operating,
Yeah. Oh no, it's, I mean, there's a lot of things, for one, it's not like the tribe is just like one Indian who's all like nice and altruistic. It's a bunch of different people that are doing their own they got their own little internal politics and shit, right?
For sure.
First of all, and then second of all, when as far the money is the means to an end for them in a lot of ways, but they don't all share the same vision either. So there's a lot of different what they do share is the ability to there's certain things like marijuana, for example. Up here, there's a lot of tribes that own dispensaries, and they have entirely different rules. Even in fishing, it's like this is something that blows a lot of people's minds that don't live in the region. It's like normally most of these guys are really good. The ones that are in touch with the tribe would never do anything fuck like this. I should preface this with saying that, but you get a Native American who's basically he picked up the white man's culture. Those guys can go fish in some fucked up ways. They can go out there and like put all kinds of gill nets out and stuff, and just mutilate the fucking population of fish and harvest massive amounts. And legally they can do that. Now again, the tribes that's a good way to have the tribe coming down on your ass if you're one of their people. But my point is that that they have, the laws are very much untethered as far as that stuff goes. Their casino here in Airway Heights is like 25 years old, and when they opened it, it was just a modest casino, and now it's like a concert venue and just giant fucking. When a comedian comes to town, they might go to the comedy club. They're definitely going to the Indian casino. And you go to Dighton Rock. I did a video on this a while back. It's a rock that's on the East Coast that has a bunch of Native American markings on it. Clearly Native American, but it was discovered in a time when dumb Indian can't carve rock on rock was this prevailing attitude. So
Wow.
what mystical tribe of people carved on this rock? And so it, you know,
Who could it be?
now it's the Portuguese is the people that have the anthropologists will argue that to the bitter end, but the descendants of the Portuguese that live in the region claim the rock, and the Native Americans coughed up the. There you go.
go.
Cheers.
Right, the president, Ricardo.
The Native Americans coughed up the claim to that rock when they were trying to get the locals to pass ordinances to let them build the casino. They already had the legal right to do all the other stuff, but they still have to get like all the building permits and shit. And so they were trying to navigate that. And so in order to get local favor, they're like, have your rock. It's very pragmatic. I mean, if most tribes that are, I think every tribe that's in existence in America today has got some seriously pragmatic people behind the helm.
But there's another side to it. It's thanks to Chris Feinrock, Dolman Pictures, and the TV series that took me on a small tour around the UP area. I've been in contact with some indigenous people, some elders, and I realized from the things that I've seen and the things that I heard that the good side of what they're doing, although they might be segregating themselves from the rest of the population, is they did all this to safeguard their own communities. And I visit health centers completely equipped where none of them pays a dime, right?
Yeah.
I see that every single kid, if you raise up and you don't have a way to have your house, they give you a house. They have protocols with the university where they don't pay a dime for their education, not a single cent. They have access to the books, to the materials, to the pens, to the pencil. Everything is paid for them, right? And that's the result of these casinos. That's the result of this other activities that they're doing. So they might have a negative effect in some ways, but they are working for their community much better than the American government is working for the American. I know the dimensions are completely different, but in scale, there is no difference. They are generating money in order to give their community everything they need. Imagine that you don't have to pay for a dentist, for physiotherapy, for operations, for your glasses.
It goes even further than that. When they built the Grand Coulee Dam, they flooded a huge chunk of Washington State. A bunch of tribal lands were flooded out, a bunch of traditional fishing lands. When all that area was flooded out, they paid the people as low as 50 cents an acre, and they forced the sale. The tribes sued and stuff, and it was in the early 90s that they won. And when they got the money for it, they doled it out amongst the tribe. Like if it was your percentage of blood, they got kind of racist about it, but you're 1/8 us, you get this much. If you're half us, you live on the reservation, you get, and that's, they didn't use it to build up the tribe and and this was before the Indian casino was a thing, really.
It's kind of the only way to do it, though, right?
Again, they live in an occupied country. If you think about it that way, of course they're going to be insular as fuck and take care of their own. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here. Again,
I was saying earlier, makes total sense.
The pragmatism, take your rock. I don't give a fuck about the rock with our ancestors painting on it. I need that casino so my kid can go to the dentist. It's cut and dry.
Yeah.
Well, once they've got that, right? Once they, like here in my area, okay, once they've got that, casinos at particular areas all over the state, as you say, the place everyone goes, the performing artist, everything, right? It's established, right? I won't say I have a problem with the way they operate. I'll say I wish they would really open their eyes, because as the lay dude, right, I go over to neighboring Louisiana. What do I see about the mound culture? I see it well documented. I see it well represented, right? And I look at that map and I see these mounds spread over to Mississippi. I see Mississippi did a pretty decent job, a little better than Alabama. I then scan over to Alabama and there's like 2 mound sites, right? So I get out and I get researching. My research, finding Mabilla and all took me to researching DeSoto, researching the whole area. And I start finding these mound sites everywhere, right? And I don't mean like in gross, pareidolia, but I mean documenting the shit. So what I see is that if these natives are in a position where they are trying to insulate, right, but they already have this massive amount of wealth, more so that they can tie you up for years in court, why wouldn't they be investing a little bit in discovering, right, and broadening their horizons? Because I'm here to tell you, if they decided to do anything in this area, like let's really start to look where our land was and see if we have a claim, they'd be eating up some real estate, real
Oh, yeah.
quick.
Yeah.
But it's just, I would like to see the interest, now that they are protected and insular, so much so that, dude, I wouldn't even apply for membership. They've
But
like cut it off in Alabama. Like
but
you can't even anymore to protect the funds. But if they would take those funds and put them into what academia is really missing out on, which is fleshing out the Native American story here, I could really be proud of everything they're doing, not just taking care of their own with healthcare. Go ahead, Ricardo.
it's just I wish to say that it's not generalized. For instance, the tribes that I've been in contact with, they have associations, they have a ground penetrating radar, they have constant projects in preserving and finding and documenting all they can. So they are in
Right.
constant deals with the government
Yeah, I was
in order
speaking
to.
local for sure. That
Yeah,
was a
yeah.
localized, not
So,
a generalized statement.
I'm not saying that everybody inside the tribe has that interest, right?
Mm.
But I say that the people that have the power to decide over that, they are very invested in this research, in finding more about their history and documented it and preserving it, right? But then you have these cases where they managed to pass of a law that forced 5 feet from a mound could not receive any kind of invasion, right? It doesn't matter where it is. In that state, it was 5 feet from the mound. But then comes another guy that is outside of the tribe and said, 5 feet. Why so much? Let's make it 2 feet. And so from that point on, it sees the law says one thing, but everybody does different because it's too much land. Why we need all that? And then we have these people going and doing picnics on those mounds because they don't know the law and they don't know where they're standing on, right? And so they ask, would you like me to go and have a picnic on your graveyard, right? Would you find that to your liking? But they can't do anything about it because after they document it and after they register what it's there, they can't do anything else. So then the state comes and makes it a golf course or makes it a recreational park, and so it's again fall into abandonment, right? So
And
it's very hard to either criticize or I don't know the word to raise up their activities because it's a mash of a lot of things, a lot of conditions. It's politics, it's money, is leadership among the tribes. There's so many factors and so many
they
interests.
hide a lot of stuff from other people. Like again, I talked about the East Wenatchee Clovis site a little bit ago. If you read the articles at the time, the anthropologists and archaeologists that were in charge of the site were saying one thing, and the Native Americans that were protesting the digs there, one guy said it very succinctly. He says, "We don't need you to come and tell us that we came across on a burying land bridge. Our myths tell us, our stories tell us that we came from the caves in the ground." And so basically get fucked with your science. I don't need it here. You're coming and asking to dig up my backyard to tell me that my God's dead. Get out of here with that. But if you talk to people that are in the tribes and stuff, they'll frequently tell you that they don't, that's not exactly the real story as to where they believe that they came from. They don't tell people, they don't tell white people, they don't tell people who aren't part of the tribe shit anymore.
Yeah.
We repay this video I've been working on for a bit. This whole big story I've been working on for a while. That a skull was repatriated to a local tribe here in Washington in 1959, and where's that skull now? They buried it. Where? They buried it.
Yeah.
We're not going to tell you where we buried it. You fucking,
yeah, of course not.
It's already got engravings from the damn University of England on the back of the damn thing or something. One of these,
Right.
yeah, it's like,
Cataloging and stuff.
so yeah, there's zero desire to play along with any of that. So
For sure.
there's a lot of that stuff that's just hidden and is going to stay that way. So a lot of it, I think, my point is, I think a lot of the digs and stuff, a lot of their own work, they're not looking to do the same kind of archaeology that we would consider. And I'm not saying natives are dumb or something. I'm just saying that they're if somebody's part of a tribe, their goals for archaeology are not the same as the university 100 miles away.
For sure.
Yeah. Sarah,
Jacqueline,
what time is it, girl?
it is time for universal truth. Dan, did you come up with a universal truth?
I did not. I'm sorry.
You didn't. You didn't do your homework, Dan.
Jesus, Graham Hancock being a racist is retarded. There you go.
Yeah.
I'd tell you a funny story. When I was in Sedona, Santa Hancock and me were outside talking, and Sedona's in Arizona, and this was in the summer, and it's hot, and she's very brown. And we're talking, and after 10, 20 minutes, she goes, "Let's go back inside. I'm getting so hot. If I don't get inside soon, I'm going to get even browner, and Graham's going to become even more of a racist." And then
Oh, bless her.
Oh yeah, she's great. I was laughing.
She just
my ass off.
embraces it. Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
you got to laugh. Look, the racism thing, I was going to say earlier, we say it's the easy thing, right? It's like Nazi if you're in politics, right? It's just something to throw out there because you can hopefully get the reaction you're going for. But people do forget there's still conversations and there's still human beings. If you have a mixed race family, you've got children, I don't know, grandchildren, right?
Yes.
That there are now conversations that have to be had that did not have to be had if somebody wasn't a fucking retard and decided to go for the easy fruit and fling it because they couldn't win on fact.
Yeah, and in addition to that, let's be clear. It's like when you start conflating somebody saying, "I think that maybe this culture, not that culture, built this site." You start conflating that with somebody who says, man, those damn Jews. You start conflating those two things together. What you're doing is you are making a nice big fat shield for that latter group to hide behind. That's really what you're doing, because those guys are sneaky motherfuckers. And the more you raise up a ruckus and make it to where people are just like, oh God, it's another guy being accused of racism, whatever. I mean, that's one of the things. One of the things you could say about Trump is that right off the bat, the way that they threw everything at him, and they were just like, the guy could walk in public and he was going to get criticized for it. Eat 2 scoops of ice cream was the article I often mentioned, because that was really an article. He ate 2 scoops of ice cream and only gave the press 1 scoop of ice cream. It's like, oh my God, son of a bitch. So, but what that does is it inoculates his followers. It inoculates his followers to any criticism. Then they're like, oh, yeah, by the way, he's got some dead hookers in his trunk. And they're like, yeah. But maybe there is actually dead hookers. Nobody bothers to look now. And that's right. So this is a serious problem that when people, we see this a lot with the racism and the sexism and the phobia accusations nowadays, there's a real problem there, because this shit really does exist. There are people out there that are fucking horrible human beings.
Absolutely.
And they are, by very virtue of the way that society is, they generally speaking have to hide their underbelly because it's so disgusting. And the more smoke we raise, the more of them that can hide.
The more smoke they raise, we call them a racist. Get over here, hide behind that. Exactly.
That's right. One thing I wanted
politics is okay, but why bring that into the pursuit of the truth of our past? Any pursuit, whatever. Politics is what it is, right? But why is that behavior infecting this search for fact and truth is where it just rises.
Well, it's just human nature to pick sides, right? Which is just such a like, we can sit here and say whatever we want about it, but we've all done it and we'll all do it again because we pick sides. We balance between probability, possibility, virtue, our particular set of morals and values. And we say, yeah, I'm going to hang out with these people over here because I don't feel like I belong over there with those people. We all do it all the time.
That's what
Which
I
is-
Is
miss
that
about
why I
the
don't have any friends? Damn it, Jacqueline.
Jason, that's why you have no friends.
That's what I miss about the 80s and 90s
Gotta
was that
stay isolated.
No,
it
that's
was
because you're weird.
Go, Dan. Well, we know that, Ricardo. Go ahead, Dan.
politics was not cool in the 80s and 90s. If you wanted to be like even after 9/11, I remember people like talking about politics and talking about 9/11 like 2 weeks later. People just be like, fuck, man. Okay, yeah, go enjoy your war, dude. Shut the fuck up. Jesus Christ. We all got sick of it so fast. But now it's like, this is like what you expect people to talk about. It's just like, just.
Yeah, it's like the
it's
lead-off
exhausting.
question,
We
right?
need
It's the
lockers.
lead-off.
This
They
is
want to know.
We have to push those motherfuckers back in the lockers. More of that needed to happen. I'm not for
Grab
bullying.
some underwear up
Every
over
now
the
and again,
door.
though, you got to cool the herd just a hair, just a hair.
Yeah.
Go over there and tell them we don't fuck around. Go. All right, now back to being nice.
Definitely.
Yeah, but
Definitely.
when
All right, I wasn't trying to interrupt everybody's universal truth. Sorry.
No, that's cool.
No, that was your job, mate. You were the one that was supposed to present it.
No,
so,
fuck,
yeah.
I suck. Sorry.
when we
I had
look
one
at it,
job.
when you look at it, and to the term that they are using to discredit and finish the conversation, there is that racism. Who is taking books out of universities? Who is taking images? Who is taking works of art of public places? Isn't that what racism is? Because if we don't have the whole broad vision, and we are reduced to what a small group of people that looks much larger than it really is, limiting our access to information, to art, to history, isn't that the real racism, right? It's more than race. It's xenophobia. I don't know if I'm saying the correct word, right? So they are using their own way of dealing and accusing others of doing it, right? And the problem is children is being raised today in an educational system where they're being told what is right and wrong in terms of racism by the limit that they have access to. So the narrower they bring it, the more popularity will have their own opinion, which that's exactly what they're trying to do. And they do it in every single system. That's why I consider that it's not a matter of academic world. It's a matter of social engineering, because it's across all aspects of society, from music to art to cinema to science itself. It's this narrowing and trying to lead people into this, like, we own the answers, and if you want them, you have to come to us because we are the only ones to have it. Everything else is
compartmentalized.
Exactly.
Ricardo.
Yeah.
That's what they want. Just like your boxes here on my screen, you're all in these little individual compartments, and at some point, one compartment decides it wants a little more, right? And it starts employing all these things, But either way, they're even willing to retreat back into that smaller compartment, as long as in that compartment they're the shit, to shorthand it, right?
And I think it's really important to point out that when it comes to this stuff, like their touchstone for why this is racist was a guy named Ignatius Donnelly, who was a politician in the late 1880s, and he was an abolitionist. He was a advocate for women's votes, but he was also, he was a white dude in the 1880s. He had some pretty spicy opinions on race for modern day, but pretty normal for those days. And he wrote about Atlantis, and his views of Atlantis were kind of an Aryan type of slant. And so this gets brought up a lot. And this guy's, Graham Hancock referenced this man, and just ergo, it's like, okay, if that's what if the pedigree of this idea is racist, is what your whole argument is, where was anthropology and archaeology at in the 1880s? In the middle of the
Stephen
fucking
Hawking's went to Epstein Island, so.
Yeah. I mean, but if you go to 1880s, you got anthropology was in the middle of the noble savage. Like,
no kidding.
Rounding up Kachina dolls and fucking pottery like it was going out of stuff. We better get all these before all these Indians we just wiped out die off completely. If you could go to a university now, it'll be like, oh, we're so sorry that we're on stolen Indian land. Anyway, back to your normal programming. And it's like, okay, I'm not expecting universities to give back the land. I'm not retarded, but at the same time, I sure as fuck expect the people that work at that university to think about that before they start standing there and pointing their finger at us and saying, you read a book from a guy that had some spicy opinions. And I'm like, you're still working in the same office as the guy who killed the native whose head's in that box over there. You're supposed to have repatriated 30 years ago. What the fuck's wrong with you? Why are you even on Twitter?
But Dan, they put the acknowledgement at the bottom of their email.
That's right. Right next to their right next to their pronouns.
That they send to each other all day.
Yes, it's exactly that they send to each other all day. God damn.
Yeah, but
yeah, Dan you covered that. You educated. I remember you did a video on the Ignatius Donnelly stuff. And then I sat and listened to Sam, Illegitimate Scholar. He read the whole damn thing.
Yeah.
Like hours. And yeah, there's racist stuff. But again, context of the time, right?
Exactly.
The dude was a racist. We're not talking about that. He was a racist. We told you,
Yeah, but even Dan in his last video spoke about the cargo cults, right? So we are... from the 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, they were evaluating these people that they were finding in these remote places on the planet from the perspective of we shouldn't judge a fish by the way he climbs a tree. They were evaluating them by their own culture, right? By their own knowledge and by their own technology. So that opens all of us, no matter how advanced we are, to some alien group arrives to Earth right now, and they are all racist against us because we are inferior people, right? So it's the same kind of thought. It's instead of trying to understand the culture and instead of trying to understand what is their knowledge and their wisdom, is just like they're inferior. Of course, if I look to a tribe that because some plane dropped cans of food into it, to this day, they create this model of this airplane to celebrate this god that send them things from the sky, right? I will consider them, well, these people are stupid. They're not stupid. They are in their own reality. Put a New York guy in their tribe and try him to make a living for a week or two there. He'll look like stupid to all of them. This guy doesn't know anything.
These cultures have to be painted that way in the narrative, Ricardo. I mean, even look when your people, the Portuguese, came over here with the De Soto expedition, and I read the way they describe the natives, they're just speaking in ways that I would find reprehensible, right? To think of another human being. Was it the culture of their time? Does that make it excusable? Well, they also murdered them as well, right? But why then has the narrative been since then that these people, let's keep in place that these people were savages? Because the major narrative of society, westward expansion, right, sort of requires that. You can't, what you're saying, you can't conquer a respectable, society.
Yeah,
so you have to paint them a certain way.
It's one of the reasons the transatlantic contact is denied, because it would deny the very ownership of the land. If there is someone there living with a high culture and a high technology, right, you cannot call them savages. You cannot call them deprived of spirituality or religion. They have to be primitive and basically idiots. We are there to save them. We might kill 99% of them, but that's all in the process of saving them, right?
Back in the day, it was we saved them with religion, and now it's morality. But it's always the same thing. We're going to fix. You've almost got that right, buddy. We just gotta tweak you a little bit there.
Right.
Meanwhile, we're taking the Native American off of the Land O'Lakes butter, and we're going to leave the land.
Well,
remove the Indian and keep the land.
I was just saying it's old white tradition. Get the fuck off that land.
It's a custom.
Leave the butter. Leave the butter.
Because
nothing happened here. Bury it quick. Yeah, exactly. The Dave Matthews song, you know that? Don't drink the water. I mean, that's what that song's all about, man, is I will bury you, I'll make my home here.
Exactly. And bringing back, I'm not pulling my string here, but one of the things that I noticed in the reactions to the old copper mines of the ancient world is I combined for doing that. I didn't come up with anything new. I didn't discover the Grail. I just summarized 140 papers, all of their data, and summarized into one single block of information. It's a huge block of information, but it's required because we need to know what are the numbers that we think were mined from 4500 to 1000 BC. How much was it mined? And there is at least 7 to 10 to 15 papers to each mine of the old world documenting how much was extracted, how much they think was extracted for that mine, right? I just combined them all. And when we get to the summarize of that, we reach a number that is completely absurd because it's too small for the vast amount of artifacts of copper and bronze we find in the archaeological record. So when I'm criticized, right, they will not look into the papers that I'm presenting for the values that I'm referencing. They will point out, oh, it's not written in a way that we like. So it doesn't matter. Yeah. Why? Because they don't do this. Because science is completely segmented. Like in a lab, in a biological lab, no one knows what they're studying because each one of them has only one small part of the whole experience. They don't know what they're doing. They just are specialists in that petri dish that they are doing, right? And this happens in all sections of archaeology. For instance, why don't archaeologists speak openly and discuss every single site with archaeoastronomers? Why don't they discuss every single site with archaeoacoustic archaeologists, right? Why don't they speak to people that understand stone, people that understand sacred geometries, people that understand antique linguistics, people that understand mythology and knows the knowledge of that population? No, it's just based on what they found on the ground. We look at it and that's described. It's like, isn't it these Denisovans that are completely described by one single thumb bone, right?
I think there's more to them than that now, but yeah, it's been.
That's how it started, right? Yeah. So they made a whole story from that single piece of a thumb bone, right? And I know that you can scale it up, but it doesn't explain anything about them.
Yeah, what's funny to me about the way that they react to it is so transparent to me because, as we discussed, archaeology is not a science in and of itself. It's an idea about a way to. It's almost just basically history informed by goods, basically, and that's like the technical definition of it, something along that. Like it's like the study of history based on the material remains or some bullshit like that, right? So, they know that it's like inherently they know it's not a science. Inherently they know that that each one of them only sees a tiny little portion. You know, that they can come and debate, argue about pyramids, but the vast majority of them don't know anything about construction, don't know anything about stone. You know, you might get one guy who's got some knowledge about geology, but by and large, they're just parroting what they've heard other experts in their field say. But they're so anxious. All that stuff that you listed off, the only one of those that they will even entertain at all is archaeoastronomy, and even that is pushing it. And the reason is because in my opinion, because there's a psychological defense mechanism. This is a real science, goddammit. I know it's not a real science. I know we're over here just using other sciences. I was arguing with some archaeologist guy who's an archaeology student and on Twitter, and he was talking about how it's a science, and he's like, look, here's some real tests that I'm doing for archaeology. It's like, okay, that's chemistry that you're showing me. Show me the archaeology test. Can you show me the No, you can't fucking show me the archaeology, because all it is co-opting a bunch of other bullshit and a bunch of other real sciences and saying, oh, look, this is a science. And again, phrenology does that. Any pseudoscience does that, right? A flat earther will take like science.
A theoretical framework is completely dependent on actual sciences to prove or disprove or support their theories. Yep. Right? You need a geologist, you need a chemist, you need the lab workers, you need, because you're just showing up and saying, look what I found. Can you tell me what it is? Like, tell me how old this is, please. You know?
And the thing with evidence, there is that, from my understanding, is that a hypothesis in the scientific world means that, like, if it makes it to the point of it being like a theory, what you're talking about here is like is something that's got no evidence opposing it. Like as soon as you got evidence that's opposing a hypothesis, you're supposed to start really kicking the tires.
You have to adjust your theory, yeah.
But we got this all over with the peopling of the world. The peopling of the Americas is a great example where the genetic evidence is just like is all over the fucking place compared to what they've got on paper about how things should have happened. So it's like why at that point you can't sit there and say that we are operating in the realm of science when you're basically holding up a story that's dogmatic. If it was Harry Potter that you guys were fucking circle jerking your papers with, we would be getting papers on House Snape and shit. House Slytherin. See, that tells you how much I like that shit. I'm old, man. When Harry Potter came out, I was already in my 20s going, oh, come on, man. You kids watch this shit.
The rides at Universal were all right, but other than that.
Those are some good rides at Universal.
I do need to get going for too much longer. I'm sorry to
yeah, let me wrap this with a question here, Dan. I was trying to get at it a minute ago, and I think Ricardo was sort of what he was hitting on. I think I got a question formulated out of is as we are talking about all this stuff, right? The state, the lay of the ground, the reality of the alt versus the arc. You as sort of oracle, in this position you found on the alt side. What do you see, right, as a way to sort of move forward for those of us that are out here that are perhaps doing some own research, right, of our own? We're trying to sort of find a way to maybe find people who are like-minded, but also, as Ricardo was getting at, we're able to collate all data. We're able to take everything in, right? And so that is what I think we're at. And we're just, as we're actively engaged in here with the Institute of Natural Philosophy. We're trying to navigate this space, but navigate it in a way that reaches out to independent researchers and those who are trying to push forward knowledge. But also, we find ourselves wondering, do we engage with these? Can we, I'll leave the question there to you at that point, man.
Well, yeah, that's, I think one of the best things that we could do to move forward, in all honesty, is going to be alternate researchers like Mark Young, who is working on getting his archaeology degree, or like Jacqueline here working on an anthropology degree. Because we clearly can't expect the academics to come over to our side of thinking, but the fact of the matter is, when it comes to certain things like this, where you already have in the mainstream public's mind, archaeology is a science. We can argue that all day long, but that doesn't really matter. That's how they perceive it. So we have to play within that framework, and in order to cater to that, you either look like a scientist or look like the crazy uncle at the Thanksgiving table. And those are really the only options. As I hate polarization, but I can hate a lot of things. It doesn't mean they don't fucking exist. So this is the framework we got to play in. So in my mind, I think a lot of it is going to come down to it makes it difficult for us because we are a herd of cats. That is one serious advantage the academic world has over us, is they can definitely lockstep like a bunch of damn fascists, no problem. And we're not good like that at all. But the more that we use that kind of we just prove it, just bear it out. Like a great example of this is Dr. Martin Sweatman's work on Göbekli Tepe's Pillar 43, where he's just hammered away at the calendar work on that. And when he gets to the point where the math on it does lean to the direction that he's at least starting from somewhere right. And they talk about he'll get a lot of shit for. They'll say that he started from nowhere and stuff, but if you read the basics of archaeoastronomy and then read his papers, he's dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. He's doing his shit right, but he's going to get rejected. Same kind of thing as Ricardo dealt with. Their complaint to he's a theoretical physicist with a specialty in chemistry. What the hell's a chemist know about archaeoastronomy? It's like, well, archaeoastronomy was founded by Sir Alexander Thom, who was a fucking engineer. It's a number crunchers are what do this stuff, man. Number crunchers are traditionally part of the field. But anyway, my point is that for us to move forward, what it's really going to take is more people with open minds stepping into the realm of science, especially and accepting the fact that that when you are doing archaeology, when you are doing things that are historical that we can't know for sure, this is not the same as chemistry in a lab. This is not the same as observable scientific phenomena. These are two different fucking things. And if you try to conflate the two, you try to conflate psychology and brainwave scans, you're going to be pissing up a rope for the rest of your life. You know, you're never going to get anywhere.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I'm not a politician. Like, not until we get to idiocracy stages of humanity.
Great answer, man. Either
way. Shit. I know shit's all fucked up now.
Fuck is my chisel. The English language is a barrier between you and I, and fuck is my chisel.
I think it's important that anyone who, you know, never underestimate the power of your voice and of, you know, if you have passion for something, to contribute to the community, because that's, like you said, we're not very good at collectively coming together and standing behind each other
You gotta
necessarily.
raise your hand.
Yeah. So like they have this whole system in place to get that lockstep on, you know. So it really, I think it's just persistence. Like there's a lot of noise, right? There's so much noise. Everything we say, they're right there to beat it back. But there's also so many people out there that are trying to listen. So I think it's really important that we just continue on. If you're passionate about a topic, do the research, do the reading, you know what I mean? It really doesn't matter if you have a piece of paper, if you can read and if you can, you know, use
double space your paper.
Yeah, double space your paper, y'all. If you want to be taken seriously. Yeah, so
or if you're just out in the mud and all you had was a phone, I mean, you know, and you start recording.
Yeah, when I left nursing, I was just an interested enthusiast. So, and I thought, you know what? Fuck it. Like if I'm going to go back to school, if I'm going to redirect my life at 40, then I want to do something that I actually give a shit about. That
do the damn thing.
Yeah, do the damn thing. So
passion and purpose.
Yeah, follow your passion and your purpose. And really, when you do that, who gives a shit what anyone says? Like, really, who cares? Like if they're narrowed down and they don't have the ability to at least entertain or have a respectful conversation with someone who has an opinion that's completely far to the left or right of someone else's opinion, then does that person even really matter? You know what I mean? In the grand scheme of things, they really don't. Because if you
unless they have more answers than you, just keep going.
Even people that disagree with me or I think are completely out to lunch, I'll still listen to what they have to say. Like, okay, tell me why, or how'd you get there? Like, please take me on that journey.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of things that, you know, a lot of times they started from a kernel of truth and then ran off the deep end with it. And you hear that kernel of truth. And a lot of times, just like we were just saying with all these archaeoacoustics and stuff, it gets lumped in with all this pseudo bullshit because it comes from the same person that says all this stuff. So a lot of times the research that I've been doing on that's been quite a bit of research. I've been doing a lot of, just took a trip a couple of weeks ago and stuff. And that's all the guy that's talking about that has had a hard time getting people to listen to it because he takes his theory into some pretty crazy spots. And he's well aware that I don't agree with him on everything, that I think some of it's getting out there a bit. But at the same time, a lot of what he's saying is just like, I'm looking at going, holy, you what, dude? I mean, like some of the things that some of the stuff, I don't want to like unpackage too much of this, but but like, you know, you guys have seen like how Washington D.C. is all like Freemason bullshit in the design and stuff. There's two cities like that in America. There's two cities that were designed that way. And one of them is Washington, D.C., and the other one is Longview, Washington. It's got like population like 70,000 people. It's this tiny little fucking buttfuck little nowhere over here. But the more research that I do into this, the more I was just like, at first I'm just like, I was shaking my head. And then the more I dig, it's just like, okay, damn, there's some really cool stuff.
There's a rabbit hole there for sure, bro.
There's something there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
anyway, I do need to get going. Thank you so
Absolutely,
much
for
for
sure.
having me. I really appreciate it. It was really good to talk to all of you. This was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yeah, Dan, it's us
Yes.
that are appreciative.
Yes.
So
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for your time again. For all of us out here, that are trying to do something on the alt side. You're definitely, a great voice and a bit of a
Mhm.
beacon. So we're greatly
Yes.
appreciative, dude. Really appreciate it.
Well, thanks again. I
God
really appreciate
continue
it.
to bless you and all that you're doing in the good fight, bro. Keep it up.
I still think, considering that you are not that well known compared to us, that you should tell everybody where they can find you. So,
if you go down to where all the fentanyl addicts hang out in your town, normally
ask for Dan.
If the meth dealer has more teeth than you, it's the police.
I go by DeDunking on YouTube. You find me on Twitter and Instagram as well. Yelling at people. But yeah, DeDunking's my name. Thank you so much. But yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, Dan, we really
Thanks so much,
appreciate it.
everyone.
Thanks.
Have a
Thanks,
good one.
everyone. Bye, boys.
Thanks, you guys.